The invisible ceiling. Your grandmother kept cash in an old coffee can, not because she didn't trust banks, but because she didn't trust herself. She needed the money hidden where she couldn't see it, an old coffee tin with a red lid pushed all the way to the back of the cabinet above the fridge. It was emergency money. It never grew, it never moved. It just sat in the dark, waiting for something bad to happen. That single image was your entire financial education. Nobody ever sat you down and said, "We are poor." Nobody handed you a book explaining why you would struggle with money for the rest of your life. It was much quieter than that. It was the way your mother's jaw tightened when the car made a strange noise it didn't make yesterday. It was the way your father quickly changed the subject whenever someone brought up retirement. It was the way every conversation about the future eventually hit a solid wall. It was an invisible ceiling made of habit, history, and the unspoken belief that people like you do not end up with more than what you started with. You absorbed all of this the way children do, completely and without even knowing it. Money became a source of shame before you were even old enough to understand what a dollar was. You missed out on school trips because the $12 fee fell on the wrong week. You rotated the same 3 shirts and got incredibly good at pretending it was a fashion choice. You learned never to ask for things, not because your parents were cruel, but because the look on their faces when you asked hurt more than not having the toy. That look taught you more than any classroom ever could. It taught you that wanting more was dangerous, that ambition belonged to other people, that the only correct posture for someone in your position was pure gratitude for what you had and absolutely zero hunger for what you didn't. For a very long time, you believed that ceiling was real. Nobody had to point it out. You just kept growing until you hit it, and then you stopped, because that is what everyone around you did. But something felt wrong. You felt a low-grade static in your chest that just wouldn't go away. You realized the map you were handed didn't match the ground you were standing on. The rules were real, sure, but maybe they weren't meant for everyone. And then, one day, something cracked. The first crack. You are 17, or maybe 22. The exact age doesn't matter, the moment does. You are sitting somewhere entirely ordinary, a break room, a bus, or your childhood bedroom at midnight, the glow of a laptop lighting up your face. You read something, or watch something, or meet someone, and a single thought enters your mind with the quiet force of a crowbar. These people didn't start with more than me, they just decided the ceiling wasn't real. That single thought is either the best thing that will ever happen to you, or the beginning of a very long, very painful decade. Honestly, it is probably both. Here is what nobody tells you about the moment you rip up the script you were handed. It doesn't feel empowering. There is no movie montage. It feels like vertigo. It feels like stepping off a cliff, not knowing if there is solid ground below or just endless air. So you start reading, obsessively, quietly. You don't tell a soul because you already know how they will react. Your cousin tried to start a business a few years ago. Everyone called him delusional until he quit. Then they called him smart for giving up. Your social circle has a highly efficient immune system. It identifies ambition as a virus and attacks it on sight. So you stayed totally silent. You read late at night. You watch videos with your headphones in. You fill a notebook with ideas that feel totally obvious, yet entirely impossible. You are building a private world inside your head, and the gap between that new world and the one you actually live in starts to make your daily life feel unreal. You launch your first project. Maybe it fails in a week. Maybe it limps along for 6 months before dying a quiet death. It does not matter. What matters is that you actually tried. In that one motion, you separated yourself from 90% of the population who will spend their entire lives saying, "I should have," or "I almost did."
But this separation comes with a heavy price tag. You just haven't paid it yet. The invoice is in the mail. The grind nobody posts about. 2 or 3 years pass. Your bank account completely ignores the thousands of hours you have put in. This is the exact chapter that gets skipped in every highlight reel, every "How I Made My First Million" video, every viral post from a guru who figured it out and now sells you a course on how to figure it out. They skip this part because it's ugly, slow, and doesn't sell. This is the part where you are tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. You are trying a strategy for the 100th time, and it's still not working. Meanwhile, everyone around you is living a normal, comfortable life. It might not be glamorous, but at least it looks restful. Your friends stop inviting you out, not because they're mad at you, but because they expect you to say no, so they just stop asking. You tell yourself this is fine. It's the price of greatness. And it is, but sacrifice still hurts, even when you're the one choosing it. Then your family start asking questions with a sharp edge to them. When is this going to turn into something real? They're not asking because they want you to fail. They genuinely love you. They're asking because they're terrified for you. And scared people get incredibly impatient. Your mother asks if you need money. The heartbreaking fact that she's offering cash she absolutely does not have makes it infinitely worse. Then you take a massive hit. You lose months of hard-earned savings on an idea that completely tanks. You have to sit alone with that humiliating number and figure out what it says about your worth. You don't sleep for a week. You hit that infamous 3 a.m. moment where your entire vision feels completely stupid. The voice of every person who ever doubted you gets incredibly loud and painfully reasonable. It whispers, "Nobody from your neighborhood has ever done this. That isn't a coincidence, that's a fact." You sit in the dark with that thought. But then you get back up. Not because you're special, not because you have some magical mindset that others lack. You get up because going backwards is impossible. You've spent enough time at the starting line to know you'd rather die than live there. The version of you that accepted the invisible ceiling is dead. You burned the floor on that side of the room. So you keep pushing. But you're fundamentally different now. You're a little harder, a little quieter. There are conversations you used to have with the people you love that you simply cannot have anymore. The distance between what's inside your head and what they can understand is just too massive to bridge over a single family dinner. That loneliness isn't loud or dramatic. It just settles into your bones, quiet and heavy. But underneath it all, something is finally working. You can feel it. The first sign. It isn't $1 million, it isn't even close, but it's real, and it's yours, and absolutely nothing prepared you for how this moment would feel. Maybe it's the first month your side hustle covers your rent. Maybe a complete stranger finally pays you for something you built. Maybe you log into your bank account and see a number that 2 years ago would have looked like a typo.
Whatever it is, it arrives on a random, boring Tuesday. You stare at the screen for an unreasonable amount of time. Then you shut the laptop and go to sleep, because you have absolutely no one to call. That is the brutal truth about winning when you are playing a solo game. The person you want to tell the most wouldn't even understand what the number means, not because they aren't smart, but because they lack the context. They haven't lived inside the brutal days that created this win. To explain the victory, you would have to explain the entire war, and you just don't have the energy for that tonight. So you sit with it in silence. You let it be real. What changes? For the very first time, you believe in your bones that the ceiling can be shattered. Before, you only understood it as a concept. Now you feel it in your bloodstream. It is the difference between reading a book about climbing a mountain and actually breathing the freezing, thin air at the summit. What gets worse? The stakes. Because now the money is real, and if it is real, it can be taken away.
Your fear completely changes shape. You used to be terrified that it would never work. Now you are terrified that it will suddenly stop. You become paranoid. You protect your momentum like your life depends on it. You refuse to talk about it. You don't post a single thing online. You don't want anyone's energy near your project until it is bulletproof. You reinvest every single dollar back into the machine. You force yourself to stay uncomfortable because you know that comfort is where momentum goes to die. This first win is not the finish line. It is just proof that you are walking in the right direction. Keep going. The crossing. The big number finally hits on a Wednesday. No epic soundtrack, no confetti. You are sitting somewhere entirely normal, in your car, at your kitchen table, or at a desk you paid way too much for. You run the numbers exactly like you have done 100 times before, but this time they clear. 7 figures. It is the very first time that phrase applies to your name and your social security number. You check the math twice. You close the tab. You open it again. You close it. You always imagined this moment would feel like a massive release, like exhaling a breath you had been holding for a decade. You expected a physical rush, a spark in your nervous system shouting, "You did it!" Instead, there's just quiet. This is the part no one ever warns you about, the profound, dizzying silence of crossing a threshold that absolutely no one in your entire bloodline has ever reached. There is no reference point for this in your family's vocabulary. Your parents literally do not have a word for what you just became. The emotional language for this kind of milestone does not exist in the house you grew up in. So you sit in the silence, feeling like a man standing in a completely empty room. You want to call your mother. You dial her number. You talk for 20 minutes. You never mention the money. Not because you're hiding it, but because you have no idea how to say the words without sounding arrogant. You don't know how to share the news without drawing a massive, uncrossable river between you and her. You are terrified that telling her won't bring you closer. It will just make the rushing water between you sound louder. So you just tell her you're doing well. She says that's good. She reminds you to eat a real dinner. You hang up the phone and sit in the quiet for a very long time. Here's the reality of extreme wealth. It instantly solves every problem you have ever had, while simultaneously revealing an entirely new set of problems you never knew existed. You suddenly have to make high-level decisions about tax structures, asset protection, investment vehicles. You grew up in a house where the emergency fund was a coffee can above the fridge. No one handed you a manual for this. You quickly realize that becoming a millionaire is not the end of your financial education. It's day one of a much harder class. But even a deeper truth slowly settles over you. You are not the same person you used to be, but you are still from the exact same place. And somehow, those two completely opposing realities are going to have to learn how to coexist inside your chest. That tension will cost you more emotional energy than the grind ever did. The gap. You go home for the holidays. It's the exact same house. It has the same faint smell baked into the walls, a smell you never noticed when you lived there, but now hits you the second you walk through the door. The TV is still entirely too loud. The kitchen table is still slightly wobbly, propped up by a folded napkin. Everything is identical. And yet there is a massive, invisible gap. It isn't a gap in love. You love these people with a fierce, burning intensity, maybe even more now because distance gives you clarity. But there's a canyon between the life you left and the life you are living now. You can feel the air pressure change. Nobody talks about it. Nobody has to. You pay for dinner. You wave it off and say it's nothing. They say you didn't have to do that. You say you wanted to. A microscopic silence follows that exchange. It lasts just long enough to be intensely uncomfortable. Then everyone moves on and no one brings it up again. But it happened.
Soon you start losing people who never actually leave. That is the strangest part of success. People rarely make a dramatic, screaming exit from your life. There is no massive falling out. It is just a slow, gradual drift, like two boats tied together, and someone is quietly, inch by inch, letting out the rope. By the time you realize how far apart you are, the shore you started on is just a blurry shape in the distance. Old friends start treating you differently. Some get very quiet around you, swallowed by their own insecurities. Others get loud and confrontational, testing you, trying to find the old broke version of you just to prove you haven't changed. And when they can't find him, they have no idea what to do with the powerful person standing in front of them. A childhood friend makes a passive-aggressive joke at dinner that is dripping with pure resentment. You don't call him out. He doesn't apologize. You both pretend it never happened, but the phone calls stop after that. You also lose the people who do leave. Relationships buckle because they were built for the version of you that played small. You lose partners who loved the broken you that needed saving, but have absolutely no idea how to love the version of you that doesn't. You grieve these losses in total silence because you literally don't have the words to complain. You can't post about it. You can't explain that success is isolating without sounding incredibly out of touch. Both massive failure and massive success leave you sitting alone in an empty room, wondering if anyone on earth actually sees you clearly. And then there is the guilt, the heavy, suffocating guilt that no one talks about. Not the generic guilt of being rich, the specific, heart-breaking guilt of watching your mother stress over a grocery bill, knowing you could write a single check to end her financial worries forever, but having no idea how to do it without completely destroying the dynamic between you. The guilt of outgrowing your roots, the guilt of surviving a system designed to keep you trapped. You pack that guilt onto your back like extra weight. You get used to it. You never put it down. The weight. There is a version of this story where reaching the top feels like pure freedom. And honestly, it is freedom. You can say yes to all the things you spent decades saying no to. You can finally fall asleep without the radioactive hum of financial panic buzzing in your brain. You can help people, really help them, not just with nice advice, but with actual hard resources, the only kind of help that actually changes the world. You can give your children a starting line miles ahead of the one you were given, and that single fact makes every late night, every lost friend, and every tear completely worth it. That part is beautifully real. But freedom comes with a heavy tax. You are the very first. That means you're flying without a map. Nobody in your bloodline can teach you how to hold on to this wealth, how to multiply it, or how to ensure it outlasts you. Generational wealth ends in one generation unless you build an ironclad system to protect it. And nobody taught you how to build systems. You are drawing the blueprints while you're living inside the house. You look at your children or the children you plan to have, and you realize a terrifying truth. You want to give them absolute security, but you're terrified of giving them the kind of soft, easy life that turns into its own prison. You don't want to steal their hunger. You don't want them to lose their understanding of what $1 actually costs. You want to hand them a solid foundation without putting out their fire. You have no idea how to pull that off yet. You're just figuring it out in real time, just like you figured out everything else. Your family looks at you differently now. You see the deep, chest-swelling pride in their eyes, and it moves you to your core. But there's also a subtle, irreversible shift in the dynamic. Without anyone taking a vote, you became the patriarch. You are the one they call.
not just for money problems, but for everything. Advice, crisis management, major life decisions. You are the ultimate authority now. It's a beautiful gift and a crushing responsibility, because deep down, you're still figuring yourself out. You just look incredibly stable from the outside. In the rare, quiet moments of the early morning, before the world demands your attention, you sit alone and feel a sensation that defies a simple name. It isn't regret, it isn't loneliness, it isn't just pride, it's pure weight. The gravity of being the one who finally made it. The weight of a breaking family curse that stops dead the moment it hits your shoulders. The weight of knowing that every single choice you make today echoes into eternity. You aren't just impacting your life, you're shaping the lives of grandchildren who haven't even been born yet. They will inherit your money, yes, but they will also inherit your definition of what is possible. You completely changed the dimensions of the room they are allowed to dream in. The dusty coffee can is gone forever. In its place are investment accounts with numbers your grandmother couldn't even fathom. Legal structures your father never knew existed. A life of absolute choice that your mother was never allowed to have. You didn't just cross a finish line, you picked it up and moved it. You carry that reality every single day, not as a burden, but as a sacred responsibility. You didn't ask for it, but you would never give it back. Because here is the ultimate secret about being the first to break the cycle. You don't just smash the ceiling for yourself, you remove it entirely for everyone who comes after you. Your kids will never even know the ceiling existed. They will look up, see the wide open sky, and just assume that's what the world has always looked like, unlimited, obvious, available. They will never know about the decades you spent staring at the underside of a trap your family accepted as reality. They won't know about your 3 a.m. panic attacks, your humiliating failures, and the crushing isolation of walking a path with 0 footprints. They will never know. And that's exactly the point. You didn't bleed for a trophy. You didn't grind for validation, or so you could look at your old friends and say, "I told you so." You went to war, so the next generation doesn't have to start in the trenches. That's what generational wealth actually means. It's not a dollar amount, it's a completely different starting line. You built an empire out of absolutely nothing, out of a coffee tin, a tight jaw, and a family that loved you from inside a cage they didn't know how to unlock. You took the invisible ceiling and you turned it into the floor. The view from up here looks nothing like you imagined. It's heavier, much quieter, and infinitely more real. And you wouldn't trade it for an easier life in a million years. Subscribe so you don't miss the next lesson. See you in the next one.